What's up, guys? I'm doing another one of these question answering things because I got a lot of good questions on the last one, which got 300 views for no apparent reason. Not really sure why that happened, but I am appreciative. As always, I really appreciate you guys participating and asking me questions. It means a lot that people value my opinion for whatever reason, and I will continue to do these as long as I get questions. As always, if you have something that you would like my opinion on, please put it in the comments of this video. Also, someone messaged me and complained I will bother to turn off my fan when I'm making videos as long as I remember. I hear it messes with the audio quality. The first one is, what are you majoring in? My major is exercise science, which is the exact same thing as kinesiology. I am hoping to do my post-grad in either physical therapy or biomechanics. I find both of those pretty interesting, and I've kept my GPA, I believe, plenty high to get into a decent program. So that's something I'll probably be looking to do down the line. Thanks. Well, you're welcome. Is it bad if someone has a flat back but pauses their benches, as I know someone whose bench is well over 500, but he flat backs, but all his pause rep, but he flat backs it, but all of his pause reps and does ridiculous amount of back and rear delts work, saying it prevents his shoulders from hurting. Sounds like it's working fine for him. If his shoulders don't hurt, there's no problem with that. I think this notion that you need to arch for shoulder health isn't really well founded. There's no evidence to suggest that a flat back bench is bad for your shoulders or dangerous as long as you're sufficiently prepared for the loads. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that's kind of been put out there by people justifying arching, is that it's required for bench to not be bad for your shoulders, but there's plenty of people who bench their whole life with a flat back, selecting reasonable loads and never experienced any pain. So I wouldn't say that's bad at all, and he benches well over 500, so that's pretty good. What ratios do you believe is decent for powerlifting? For example, a 2 times body weight bench, a 3 times body weight squat, and a 3.5 times body weight deadlift. Okay, so that's something that I can't give you a clear answer for, because it's going to vary very heavily by weight class, right? Because generally speaking, body weight multipliers do not scale linearly across body weights, right? So a 4 times body weight deadlift isn't even all that rare. I mean, I want to take that back. It's good, but it's a lot more times the body weight than you're going to see a super heavyweight do, right? There have been a reasonable number of people to pull 4 times body weight, whereas if Ray Williams pulled 4 times his body weight, or Eddie Hall or Thor, we would be looking at substantially higher than the current world record. About 500 pounds above the current existing world record, if not more. So it's hard to give general standards, nor do I think they matter. I think people really want to know where they're at or where they're going to be decent. And the thing is, it's so relative that you can have well below those lifts and be considered a good local lifter at your local meets. You're going to be the fucking alpha top dog of most YMCAs well below those lifts. So it's a matter of scale, right? So when people are like, oh, what's good, what's bad, what's intermediate, I can never give them a straight answer, because it's going to come down to what scale you're looking at a YMCA. Numbers are phenomenal. At a local powerlifting level, they might be dead average, and at an international powerlifting level, they might be awful. It doesn't really mean anything without those specified contexts. And the same thing for classifying Wilks, right? Is like, yeah, 500 Wilks is very good. You're a very good lifter, but you're going to get absolutely obliterated at a large meet with a 500 Wilks, right? So it's all relative to what the level you're looking at is. I know that's not a very helpful answer, and it's not what you were looking for, but that's my opinion. What bench program would you recommend? I don't know. As far as a bench-only program, I think people have gotten pretty reasonable results out of using Smolov Jr. for their bench. I did it once upon a time. I got good results. That's not to say it's for everybody. I think that if you don't have a reasonable level of technical proficiency, that might be a bit much and put you down the path of a shoulder injury or some pec tweaks. But Matt Disbrow's old death bench program is also pretty cool. Again, it kind of depends on what level you're at, right? So both of those programs I think might be okay for a low-level intermediate guy who really, or especially Matt Disbrow's program. Let's say that was like something I might give to a low-level intermediate lifter who really just needs to gain a lot of muscle mass with like a relatively lower specificity in their training. That would be a fucking phenomenal program. But if you're a upper end, intermediate, low advanced, high-end advanced, right, and you're going to be looking at programs with higher specificity that also are going to be more tailored to your individual recovery needs. So again, it's kind of relative to where you fall in the like advancedness, what your body weight is, how much you're benching, what kind of frequency you can handle. But I do like that death bench program if you can get your hands on it, and if you're in that population I mentioned. What is your opinion on types of training? For example, Dawson Windham uses where heavier singles are intermixed quite often. I know every training most has merit. I was wondering what you think. Okay, not 100% sure how Dawson coaches all of his athletes, but you know what I mean. Okay, yeah, I follow Dawson, but I do not know his methodology well enough to make a educated observation about it. So I'm going to opt out of that part of the question, but I will opt into heavier singles are a perfectly effective part of many different styles of programming. They can be done very well. My opinion is that they work very well. It is not how I choose to train myself, just because I don't have any issues maintaining my upper end strength or technical execution. So spending time in a hypertrophy or a traditional strength phase, backing away from those 90% plus loads, seems to have no negative bearings on my ability to perform. When I go push back up to those numbers, if I put in sufficient work below them, I go up and beyond them without any need for year-round practice in those upper ends. Some people would argue for a concurrent or daily undulating periodization. We're like, okay, Sam, why would you spend a dedicated 1 month on hypertrophy when you could have one session per week that's hypertrophy and one that's more high intensity oriented? I personally find that I get a little bit banged up following that kind of daily undulating pseudo concurrent method, so I don't do that. And some people would follow, okay, kind of a block scheme, but prior to our volume work, we're going to touch a sub-maximal single to, keep technical decay away. I just find I don't need to do that, frankly. I've tried it. I just don't see any additional benefit to working up to a single at 7 prior to my volume phases, so I just don't do it. But to each their own, and it does work extremely well for a lot of people that are stronger than I am. So I guess that's my best answer. What's the most calories you've ever bulked on? How much weight did you gain eating that many calories? What's the least calories you've ever cut on? I've done, let's see, I would say as far as like I'm sure I've eaten more for a couple of weeks when I was really pushing the limit, but as far as like meticulously tracked eating the same thing every day, like a pre-selected number, the highest I have chosen to put my calories is up at I think 5,800. That was when my NEAT, so like outside the gym activity, was moderately high, so I was gaining weight at about 3/4 of a pound per week, and I think I rode that out for, I don't know, like 1 or 2 training blocks. I think all said and done, I gained about 10 pounds. Was the least calories you've ever cut on? I have never done a dedicated cut. I know I have mentioned that possibly mini cuts is a valuable tool to keep your body composition at a reasonable point so that your nutrient partitioning is better, and gaining additional muscle mass is something that you can do more easily. That being said, I have a shit appetite and a relatively high metabolism, so anytime I'm not really diligent with my diet, I lose weight anyway, so I've never had the need to do a dedicated cut to shed body fat. Anytime I slack tends to do that for me. So I guess that would be my answer. When I slack, it probably looks like about 4,000 calories a day. maybe 3,500 for a couple of days, but I would never let myself like be that unadherent to my diet for multiple days in a row. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. What is mind-muscle connection valuable in compound movements provided you have adequate form, or is it more desired in isolation exercise? So it is desired in isolation. Isolation exercise, absolutely. Some research has shown pretty definitively that a better mind-muscle connection is going to lead to better hypertrophy, which is generally speaking, that is the goal of your isolation work. So yes, 100%. Within the compound movements, that's a complicated one. So do you need to connect with the primary movers to execute well? Absolutely not, right? I don't really feel my quads contracting all that well when I'm squatting, but if I'm in certain positions and I have the weight distributed in my feet, my knees are forward, I know my quads are contributing heavily to the lift. The feeling does not matter. But that being said, there's certain aspects of form where a greater mind-muscle connection can be helpful in allowing you to execute better, right? So what's that going to look like? Maybe a better feeling for your lats and ability to contract your lats in the bottom position of a deadlift is going to lead to better lat activation and better reinforcing of your thoracic position using your lats. Maybe better mind-muscle connection with your back is going to allow you to maintain your scapular position a little bit better when you're bench pressing. So having a feel for certain muscles isn't useless. It's definitely not the as important as it is on isolation exercises, but it can certainly play a role in your technique. Even something as simple as knowing how to use your triceps when benching, which I find is something that takes quite a while to develop in the first place, you could argue that falls into that category as well. So yes and no would be my answer. I hope that helps. What's your opinion on someone to bulking to 15 to 20% body fat and just maintaining that same weight for as long as possible while trying to get stronger? Sounds fine to me. There's nothing wrong with that approach at all. I generally think that effective training has some form of periodization. That's something that most people can agree on. I am of the opinion that a effective performance diet also has some form of periodization. It's not just like you wouldn't do the exact same workouts every week forever and expect to drive any progress. So if body composition is something you're interested in, which I think you should be because maximizing lean body mass helps you get stronger, having some sort of periodization to your diet I think would be better. That can be having cut and bulk phases, or within a week you could do like the dietary version of daily undulating, which would be high and low carb days, high and low calorie days based on your training demands of those days, right? Because you should be tailoring your diet to your training demands, which I assume change at different points in the week. So that would be my answer. When are you uploading a full workout? I don't know, man. At some point. It's just kind of embarrassing to throw down my phone and film a bunch of boring warm-ups. Plus, my training right now is pretty boring, and I think even you nice people on my channel would be a little bit bored by 6 sets of 8 on the squat, as there's not a whole lot to look at. It's just putting in the work. It's pretty boring. I apologize that I'm so incoherent tonight. I'm very tired, seemingly as always, but said volume workouts are really getting the best of me, and I find myself, especially after my squat and deadlift sessions, like slurring my words as if I'm drunk. It's pretty cool. What are 2 gold nuggets of information you got when you left the intermediate phase that you got when you left the intermediate phase and were well into your advanced phase? In other words, what are 2 general tips you think the average intermediate lifter could benefit from? All right, I should have read these questions beforehand so I could have a good answer ready. But if I were to try to think of 2, depends what you think of as intermediate, right? So if you're someone with really high ambitions, you might be advanced and be categorizing yourself as like a beginner or intermediate. If you're like, well, in the grand scheme of things, I'm an intermediate, because I think of myself sometimes as a upper end intermediate lifter, which makes it kind of douchey to make question videos, but It's all relative, and people seem to listen to them. So that's what I tell myself. But I would say that if you're someone who has gotten to where you are, so if you're someone and you are getting stronger faster than your friends, if you're getting stronger faster than your peers, and you are the kind of person that hey, I know I'm passing them because I just train harder than they do and I push myself hard. You pride yourself in pushing yourself hard. If you are that category of person, just know there comes a time when what's going to take you from being pretty strong to really strong is knowing when to push and when to back off, because you're going to be able to drive strength using your like hard work. But what's going to become more and more difficult is keeping yourself healthy. So being creative, not just being super militant about doing exactly what's written down. Because you're just going to get progressively more banged up as you try to hit a heavy lift and you're not going to achieve it. So learning to be flexible and know when to push if you're someone who's really militant and pushes really hard. That was a very big one for me. And then just take notes. If you have training blocks, just break them up. You have your hypertrophy phase, you have your strength phase, you have your peaking phase. However the fuck you want to think about it. And don't just take notes based on a whole period of time. Each block just write down. You're like, honestly, I feel like I gained an appreciable amount of muscle this hypertrophy phase. This general workload is very solid for me. Will it be perfect forever? No, absolutely it will not. As you get stronger, that will probably lower, or maybe you will develop your work capacity and it'll go higher. But if you have a successful hypertrophy phase, you need to go right down somewhere. All right, this general workload, this number of work sets per week in this rep range resulted in good results. Then, when you get to your next hypertrophy phase, do it again. If it stops working, you need to start fiddling with it, but write down different structures that worked for different training goals. If you have a strength phase that went outstandingly well, and especially if it followed a bad hypertrophy phase, right? You didn't just phase potentiate well. Write down what the fucking workload was and then duplicate it with slightly more weight again the next time you do it. Something I wish I did, because I, being always self-coached, would always change mine. To the point that I think I missed out on a lot of free gains by not just repeating the things that were extremely effective in their respective phases. So I don't know. I'd probably give two different answers if I had more time to think about it, but just me thinking back what I fucked up, those were the two that jumped out at me. Again, I apologize. I'm not talking well today, but I will do my best because these are good questions. When you're on those mini cut phases, how fast should you lose weight? How would you adjust training? So ideally, in a perfect world, you don't adjust your training because you're losing weight at like a relatively slow clip. I would never go above a pound a week. I probably would aim for like 3/4 of a pound per week. I wouldn't adjust the training if you can, because applying an aggressive stimulus is, as far as weights, is going to be the most powerful thing you can do to signal to your body to retain the muscle mass while you're in a caloric deficit. Does a little slow mini cut pose any real threat to muscle loss in the first place? No, probably not. It's only when you're pushing to extreme levels of leanness that muscle wasting, I think, is going to be a really real fear. So, if you're prepping for a bodybuilding show, yeah, you might be, at the end, you notice you burn through some muscle. But as far as a well done mini cut, I would just wouldn't really adjust your training demands. If you're having issues recovering due to like the slightly lower input of energy, I might dial back your total workload, but it wouldn't be a major adjustment. I hope that helps, but it definitely varies a lot based on like where you're at in training as well. So the modifications I might make to a peaking block, which is probably none, might be different than what I would do in a hypertrophy block, right? So it's gonna be a little different. If this is something you're interested in, and if you're not like me and you have money, I believe Dr. Mike Israetel sells like a mini cut Bible, something, I think it's called something like that. Might be worth looking into. How do you distinguish when someone needs to focus on improving their technique versus getting stronger? Does trying to improve technical proficiency stop being productive at a certain point? Okay, so I'm going to knock out the obvious answer off the bat and then get into the slight bit of nuance and then cut this because this is a long video. Um, the obvious answer: you should always be trying to get stronger and improve technique to the best of your ability. But how do you know when, and can it be counterproductive? Yeah, so we'll take the extreme example of that douchebag at the YMCA with a man bun who won't go above a 2 plate squat until his form is what he deems spotless. We know that slightly suboptimal form, assuming adequate weight selection, is not outstandingly dangerous. Your body is a lot more robust than we're told it is. You're not going to go to Stap City because your knees knocked in very slightly on your maximal squat set. So waiting to push your strength until this insane standard of form that has been brought about by form policing on the internet and people being scared of hurting themselves or getting called out, that would be too far. And you see the powerlifting equivalent of this where people will not apply difficult enough sets often enough because they're so scared of their technique being suboptimal that they're not doing enough to drive progression. And I've talked about in a past video the spectrum you can draw between effort and form focus. And everybody's optimal based on where they're at in their training career is going to fall somewhere on this spectrum of one being just extreme intensity and effort and one being focus on the form. Because the more you focus on the form, you gradually get detract from your intensity, in my opinion. So if you're someone who, has always gone balls to the wall, just attack the weight, move it by whatever means necessary, you're probably a little bit too far on the effort side. And what you need to do to become a truly good lifter is really put that focus into your form. This has been me most of my lifting career. I feel my strength was better than my technique for the majority of my time lifting, and spending the time really focusing on technique rather than intensity has paid big dividends for me. On the other hand, if you're someone who you're just not getting stronger and and you obsess about your technique, but there's no rate of progression being driven, you might just need to learn how to get fired up. You need to probably go up the arousal curve. You probably need to just push yourself harder. Stop sandbagging your sets if you follow an RPE based program. Be honest and stop overrating your RPEs. And learn what a fucking 10 feels like, because you might not know what a real at 10 set of 8 feels like. So that's kind of what I would look at. Is if I was coaching someone, I can usually pretty quickly get a feel for if they're on one side or the other just based on looking at their spreadsheet, let alone talking to them. But having the self-awareness to know where you fall on that, and then so it's tough when you don't have a coach. It's absolutely possible, though. I don't want to be one of those guys who says everyone needs a coach, because you don't. If your brain works and you're determined, you can get really strong without a coach. You just have to pay attention and learn, right? But it takes a lot of self-awareness to know where you fall on that spectrum, and then it takes discipline to do something that isn't what you naturally want to do or what you would choose to do if left alone. So I hope that helps. For the third time, I apologize for all of the word slurring and babbling. I will do better in the future.